It was a quiet afternoon when my daughter-in-law dumped my granddaughter on me, not even bringing her to my door. She left a note, "Take care of the brat," before speeding off to Santorini. She made my sweet Lily walk a mile for spilling juice. My heart shattered, but a quiet fire ignited inside me. I simply smiled, knowing her perfect life was about to unravel. Follow my story, like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The late afternoon sun cast long, gentle shadows across Eleanor's meticulously kept garden. At 65, she found immense solace in the earth, her hands calloused but nimble as she carefully tied a wayward branch of her prize-winning Cherokee purple tomatoes. The air was thick with the scent of ripening fruit and damp soil, a symphony of summer that always brought a quiet contentment to her soul. She hummed an old tune lost in the simple rhythm of nature when the tranquility was abruptly shattered by the jarring growl of an engine. A sleek, obsidian Porsche Cayenne, polished to a mirror sheen, glided to a halt on the gravel driveway. It was David's car, but he was at work. Eleanor's heart gave a little flutter of anticipation. Perhaps it was Lily, her granddaughter, arriving for an unscheduled visit, a rare and cherished treat. The driver's side door swung open, and Serafina, David's wife and Lily's mother, emerged. She was a vision of effortless chic, draped in a cream linen dress that seemed to float around her slender frame, oversized sunglasses obscuring her eyes, and a designer handbag tucked neatly into the crook of her arm. Every detail, from her perfectly styled blonde hair to her meticulously pedicured toes, screamed an air of untouchable entitlement. A stark contrast to Eleanor's comfortable gardening clothes and dirt-smudged hands. Eleanor offered a warm, if slightly tentative, smile, anticipating a brief, polite exchange, perhaps a quick drop-off of Lily for a weekend visit, as was often the pattern when Serafina decided she needed space. But Serafina didn't approach the house. Instead, she popped the trunk with a remote and, with a dismissive flick of her wrist, pulled out two small child-sized suitcases and Lily's familiar pink floral school bag. Eleanor watched, a knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't a weekend bag. This was more. "I'm going to Santorini," Serafina announced, her voice flat, devoid of warmth or apology, as she approached Eleanor, extending a crisp, folded piece of paper. "For personal development." She didn't wait for a response, her eyes already scanning the horizon as if looking past Eleanor, past the house, to some distant, more appealing destination. Eleanor took the note, her fingers fumbling slightly. Unfolding it, her eyes scanned the elegant script, each word a chilling blow. "Going to Greece for personal development. Take care of the brat. Back when I'm back." The words swam before her eyes. The brat. That was Lily, her sweet 6-year-old granddaughter. "Serafina, you can't just," Eleanor began, her voice rising, a mixture of shock and burgeoning indignation. This wasn't a casual request, it was an order, delivered with an air of absolute authority. Serafina cut her off with a wave of a perfectly manicured hand. "Oh, please, Eleanor, don't pretend you don't miss her. You always go on about how much you miss Lily. Now you have her." She offered a thin, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. Before Eleanor could fully process the audacity, Serafina was already retreating to her car, a blur of cream linen and expensive perfume. The Porsche's engine roared to life, a high-pitched snarl, and with a crunch of gravel, she reversed and sped away, leaving a plume of dust in her wake and a bewildered grandmother standing alone. Eleanor stood frozen for a moment, the crumpled note in her hand. "But, Lily?" she whispered. Then louder, a frantic edge to her voice. "Where is Lily?" Serafina hadn't brought Lily to the house, hadn't even parked. A terrifying realization dawned on her. She sprinted towards the end of her driveway, a growing panic seizing her. She spotted a small, dark shape far down the main road, nearly a mile away, a road busy with cars. Her heart leaped into her throat. Without a second thought, Eleanor began to run, her gardening clogs clumsy on the pavement, her breath catching in her chest. "Amatami past." Each pounding step was fueled by a desperate fear. The distance seemed endless, but her eyes were fixed on the tiny figure. As she drew closer, she could make out Lily, a small, weary silhouette, struggling with a brightly colored suitcase nearly as big as she was. Lily's head was down, her little shoulders slumped, a picture of utter dejection. Lily, oh, sweetheart, Eleanor cried, scooping the tiny girl into her arms. Lily clung to her, her small body trembling, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her usually bright blue eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. Granny, Lily sobbed into Eleanor's shoulder. Mama said I had to walk because I was bad at breakfast. I spilled my orange juice. Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with shame and exhaustion. Eleanor held her granddaughter tighter, her own eyes welling up with tears, not of sadness, but of a fierce, protective rage she hadn't felt in years. You're not bad, sweetheart, she whispered into Lily's soft hair, her voice thick with emotion. You're perfect, and you're safe now. You are so, so safe with Granny. She carried Lily, one arm around her, the other dragging the abandoned suitcase, back towards the comforting sanctuary of her home, her mind already whirling with thoughts of what Serafina had done. That evening, the aroma of simmering chicken and dumpling soup filled Eleanor's kitchen, a scent of comfort and home that Eleanor hoped would soothe Lily's troubled spirit. It was Lily's absolute favorite, a recipe passed down through generations. She watched as Lily, bathed and dressed in clean pajamas, sat at the kitchen table, her small hands clasped in her lap. Eleanor placed a steaming bowl before her, the rich broth and fluffy dumplings a warm, inviting sight. Lily stared at the bowl, her big blue eyes wide and wary. She didn't reach for her spoon. After a long moment, she looked up at Eleanor, her voice barely audible, a fragile whisper that tore through Eleanor's heart. Granny, she asked, am I allowed to eat today? The question hung in the air, a chilling testament to the life Lily had been living. Eleanor felt a sharp, unbearable pang of heartbreak, realizing the true depth of the emotional conditioning, the fear that had been instilled in her precious granddaughter. It wasn't just about spilling orange juice, it was about control, punishment, and the denial of basic needs. A quiet, unshakable resolve settled deep within Eleanor. She reached across the table, taking Lily's small hand in hers, her touch firm and loving. Oh, Lilybug, Eleanor murmured, her voice soft but unwavering. In this house, you never, ever have to ask permission to eat. This is your home now, and you can always, always eat whenever you are hungry. She squeezed Lily's hand gently, a silent promise forming in her heart that things were about to change drastically. The first rays of dawn filtered through the lace curtains of Eleanor's guest room, painting soft stripes across the antique floral wallpaper. She had awoken with a sense of unease, the events of yesterday replaying in her mind. Rising quietly, she made her way to the doorway, her heart heavy with concern for her granddaughter. There, on the edge of the bed, sat Lily. Still dressed in the same crumpled school uniform she had arrived in yesterday, she was as motionless as a porcelain doll. Her small hands were folded neatly in her lap, her back perfectly straight, her gaze fixed on some unseen point across the room. She hadn't even stirred from the position Eleanor had gently placed her in after carrying her home. The sight sent a fresh wave of grief through Eleanor. This was not the natural restlessness of a 6-year-old. This was a trained stillness, born of fear. Good morning, sweetheart, Eleanor said softly, stepping into the room. Lily startled slightly, her eyes widening, as if caught doing something wrong. Did you sleep well? Lily blinked slowly, then in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, Am I supposed to get dressed now, Granny? The question, so simple yet so loaded, sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. It wasn't, can I get dressed, or what should I wear? But am I supposed to? The implication was chilling. Every action, even the most basic, required prior authorization, a rigid schedule. Eleanor knelt beside the bed, her gaze softening. You can get dressed whenever you like, darling. And if you'd like, we can pick out something fresh and comfortable from your suitcase. Or, she added, a sudden thought striking her, would you like a warm shower first? We can wash all the dusty road off. Lily's eyes, still wide and hesitant, widened even further. I'm allowed to shower, she whispered, as if the concept of personal cleanliness was a privilege, not a given. The question cut Eleanor deeper than any insult Serafina had ever thrown her way. Of course you're allowed, my love, Eleanor said, her voice firm with affection. Everyone is allowed to be clean and comfortable here. After helping Lily into the bathroom, Eleanor turned to the small, colorful suitcases Serafina had so carelessly dropped off. She knelt, her fingers fumbling with the latches. When she opened them, her heart sank. Inside were only a few sets of plain, slightly worn clothes, mostly dark, practical items, nothing colorful or playful that a child her age would typically own. There were no toys, no beloved stuffed animals, no crayons, no storybooks, no small treasures that spoke of a child's imagination or comfort. It was a suitcase packed for an inmate, not a child. As she gently sifted through the meager contents, a small, worn notebook caught her eye, tucked away at the very bottom, almost as if hidden. It was thin with a faded blue cover, and on the front, in uneven, careful second-grade handwriting, were the words, Lily's Rules. Eleanor's breath hitched. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she opened the notebook. The pages were filled with more of Lily's painstaking printing, each rule numbered, each rule a blow to Eleanor's burgeoning fury. 1. Only talk when Mama asks you a question. 2. Eat only what Mama puts on your plate. If you don't eat it all, you don't get dessert. 3. Ask permission before using the bathroom, even if it's urgent. 4. Do not make noise or run in the house. Mama gets headaches easily. 5. Don't cry. Crying makes Mama upset and gives her a headache. 6. Sit perfectly still when Mama is talking to grown-ups. 7. Always apologize if Mama says you've done something wrong. Eleanor's hands trembled as she turned the page, her eye blurring with unshed tears of pure, unadulterated rage. The final page contained the chilling culmination. If I break the rules, I don't get dinner, and I have to apologize 10 times to Mama. This was it, the sickening explanation for Lily's unnatural stillness, her hesitancy, her question about food. Eleanor felt a surge of incandescent fury, a fire she hadn't known she possessed, burning through her veins. Serafina wasn't just neglectful, she was cruel, psychologically abusive, systematically breaking her own child's spirit. A profound resolve solidified within Eleanor. No, this would not stand. She would not let this woman destroy Lily. She would fight for her granddaughter. Later, over a breakfast of fluffy pancakes and fresh berries, a tentative lightness returned to Lily's face. Eleanor watched as Lily, after a moment of hesitation, devoured her breakfast, her small movements still a little stiff, but her eyes beginning to sparkle. My teacher, Mr. Albright, she's very kind, Lily announced, suddenly unprompted, a rare burst of enthusiasm. She read us a story about a brave knight yesterday. He didn't have to ask permission to eat. A small giggle escaped her, a sound Eleanor had barely heard since Lily's arrival. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Eleanor smiled, genuinely delighted to hear about something positive. And do you have many friends at school? At the mention of friends, Lily's cheerful demeanor instantly crumpled. Her eyes fell to her plate, her pancakes suddenly looking less appealing. Mama said I couldn't anymore, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She said Chloe's family is poor and it looks bad for us. Mama says people judge you by who you spend time with, and that I need to be more discerning. Lily repeated the words with a precision that indicated they had been rehearsed many times. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of anger, realizing the insidious depth of Serafina's isolation tactics. It wasn't just about control within the house, it was about isolating Lily from the outside world, molding her into a miniature version of Serafina's shallow, image-obsessed self. Lily was being stripped of genuine connection, of the innocent friendships vital to a child's development. Mama says I'm too mature for childish games, Lily continued, her voice heavy with a resignation that broke Eleanor's heart. Sometimes I just watch the kids playing in the park from our apartment window. They look like they're having so much fun. The raw longing in her voice was unmistakable. Eleanor reached across the table, taking Lily's small, still hand. Well, you're at Granny's house now, Lily, she said gently, her eyes meeting Lily's, conveying a world of unspoken promise. And I think playing is very, very important. It's how children learn and grow. My house has a big yard, and beyond that, there's a whole farm. Would you like to go outside and explore the farm this morning? We can see the chickens, and perhaps there are some little frogs near the pond. Lily's eyes, which had been so guarded, suddenly lit up with a pure, unadulterated joy that spread across her face like sunrise. It was a transformation, a glimpse of the unburdened child Eleanor knew was still inside. Really, Granny? I can explore? Yes, my love. Really? Eleanor confirmed, a lump forming in her throat at the intensity of Lily's reaction to such a simple offer. As they ventured outside into the warm morning air, Lily moved tentatively, like a bird newly freed from a cage. She pointed at a butterfly, then looked at Eleanor, asking, "Am I allowed to follow it?" She paused before stepping off the paved path. "Is it okay if I step on the grass?" Every interaction with the world was filtered through a request for permission. Eleanor patiently guided her, her heart aching, yet resolute. "Lily, this is your adventure. You can follow the butterfly, you can step on the grass, you can touch the flowers gently. And if you make a mistake, if you trip or get a little dirt on your dress, that's perfectly all right. Making mistakes doesn't make you bad, Lily. It makes you human. It makes you brave because it means you're trying new things." She smiled, a silent vow forming within her. She would teach Lily what it meant to be a child again. She would teach her freedom. The afternoon sun warmed Eleanor's living room, casting a golden glow on the worn armchair, where Lily now slept soundly, a half-read storybook resting on her chest. The exploration of the farm had exhausted her in the best possible way, and the deep, even breaths coming from her tiny frame were a balm to Eleanor's worried heart. While Lily was safe, Eleanor knew she couldn't ignore the gaping hole in this situation. David, her son, Lily's father. With a heavy sigh, Eleanor picked up the cordless phone, her fingers hovering over David's number. She braced herself, knowing this conversation wouldn't be easy. David had always been a good son, but since marrying Serafina, a subtle shift had occurred. He'd become more distant, his priorities seemingly rearranged, always deferring to his wife's whims and ambitions. The phone rang twice before David's voice, brisk and a little harried, answered. "Hi, Mom. Look, I can't really talk right now. I'm in meetings all day. Is everything okay?" His tone was already dismissive, clearly indicating his desire to end the call quickly. Eleanor didn't waste time on pleasantries. Her voice, though calm, held an edge of urgency that she hoped would cut through his distraction. "David, your daughter is here." There was a long, pregnant pause on the other end, the kind that spoke of confusion mixed with an underlying irritation. Then his voice, now tinged with suspicion, finally broke the silence. "What do you mean she's there, Mom? Is she just visiting?" "No, David, she's not just visiting," Eleanor stated, her resolve hardening. "Serafina dropped her off yesterday. On the main road, not even at my house. She said she was going to Santorini for personal development. She left me a note saying, 'Take care of the brat.'" Eleanor heard the tremor in her own voice, a mix of anger and disbelief that was still raw. A beat of silence, then David's dismissive laugh, hollow and forced. "Mom, that doesn't sound right. Serafina wouldn't just leave Lily. You know how much she loves her. She's probably just confused about the dates, or maybe there was a misunderstanding with a friend picking her up. Serafina mentioned a trip, yes, but she would never just abandon Lily like that." He spoke with an air of absolute certainty, as if Eleanor herself were prone to wild exaggerations. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. "David, she left your daughter on the side of the highway and made her walk a mile to my house in the heat. A 6-year-old dragging her own suitcase. This isn't confusion. This is abandonment. I found a notebook of rules she made Lily follow. Rules like, ask permission to use the bathroom and don't cry because mama gets a headache." The words tumbled out, fueled by the shocking discoveries of the morning. The defensive tone in David's voice sharpened. "Mom, you know Serafina has been incredibly stressed lately. Her new business venture, the pressures of city life. She needed a break. And she knows Lily is always safe and well cared for with you. She trusts you, Mom. That's why she probably thought it was okay to drop her off, knowing you'd be there." He completely bypassed the cruelty, framing it as a thoughtful delegation, a testament to Eleanor's reliability. Eleanor felt a surge of indignation. "A break, David. She's 6 years old, not a package you can leave on a doorstep. Mothers don't get to take breaks from their children and dump them on relatives without warning, without even a conversation. What kind of example is that?" Her voice, usually soft, now rose with a righteous anger she rarely displayed. "And the rules, David? Do you know what she has been doing to Lily? She's been crushing her spirit." David sighed, a sound of exasperation. "Mom, you're overreacting. Serafina has high standards, but she loves Lily. I'll call her. I'll sort it out." I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for all of this. You always tend to blow things out of proportion when it comes to Serafina. The accusation stung, twisting the knife of Eleanor's frustration. He was brushing her off, just as he had brushed off the gravity of Serafina's actions. The conversation ended shortly after, with David promising to call Serafina and figure things out. He offered no apology, no real concern for Lily, only a thinly veiled irritation at Eleanor for disrupting his day and his comfortable narrative. Eleanor hung up the phone, a profound sense of isolation washing over her. She knew David was either completely under Serafina's manipulative influence, or worse, choosing to ignore the harsh realities of his wife's behavior because it was easier than confronting it. The thought chilled her to the bone. Lily's father, her protector, was failing her. That evening, as Eleanor tucked Lily into her freshly made bed, the little girl's hands clutched a worn teddy bear Eleanor had found in a dusty box in the attic. The room was softly lit by a bedside lamp, casting a warm glow on Lily's peaceful face. "Granny," Lily whispered, her voice small and hesitant, "when is Mama coming back?" Eleanor's heart constricted. She stroked Lily's hair, trying to keep her own voice steady, calm. "I don't know, sweetheart, but you're safe here with me. You don't have to worry about anything." Lily shifted, snuggling deeper into the covers. After a moment, she whispered again, so softly that Eleanor almost didn't hear her. "I hope she doesn't come back for a long time. I like it here. I don't have to follow so many rules." The confession, delivered with such quiet sincerity, nearly broke Eleanor's heart all over again. It wasn't just a preference. It was a desperate plea for freedom, a silent acknowledgement of the torment she had endured. Eleanor hugged Lily tightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. As she smoothed the child's hair, a silent, unshakable promise formed within her. She would get to the bottom of what was truly happening. She would not let Serafina hurt Lily any longer. She would fight for her granddaughter's childhood, for her happiness, for her very soul. This was not just a temporary solution. This was a war, and Eleanor was ready to be Lily's fiercest warrior. Nearly a month had passed since Lily's arrival, and Eleanor felt a cautious optimism blossoming in her heart. The rigid stillness that had first characterized Lily's movements had begun to melt away, replaced by the natural bouncy energy of a child. Laughter, clear and bright, now echoed through the farmhouse rooms, and the agonizing "am I allowed?" questions had dwindled, replaced by eager "can I?" or simple declarations of what she wanted to do. She was still a quiet child, but a spark, long extinguished, was steadily rekindling within her. One sunny morning, Eleanor sat on the porch swing, gently braiding Lily's fine silken hair. Lily was humming a little tune she'd learned from a cartoon, her small body relaxed against Eleanor's side. It was a moment of pure, simple contentment, the kind Eleanor cherished. As she wove the strands of hair, a thought, nagging at her for weeks, finally surfaced. "You know, sweetheart," Eleanor began, her voice soft, "I remember sending you a very special teddy bear for your 6th birthday just a few months ago. It was a beautiful, fluffy one with a little blue ribbon. Do you remember him? I was hoping he'd be here with you." Lily's humming stopped. Her small shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly, and her gaze, which had been fixed on a busy bumblebee, dropped to her lap. "Oh," she said, her voice small and tinged with a familiar sadness. "Mama sold him." Eleanor's fingers, mid-braid, froze completely. The quiet domestic scene shattered around her, replaced by a deafening silence in her mind. She stared at the back of Lily's head, utterly dumbfounded. Sold him? Lily, sensing Eleanor's stillness but not fully understanding its cause, continued in a matter-of-fact tone as if explaining something perfectly normal. "She sells lots of my things, Granny. The toys you send me, like the building blocks and the art kit. And the books, too, if they're too pretty. Sometimes even my clothes if they're too nice or have shiny buttons. She says they take up too much space, and we don't need them." The room, the porch, the entire world seemed to spin around Eleanor. All the lovingly chosen gifts, the carefully wrapped packages, the anticipation of Lily's delighted squeals, all of it had been for naught. Every gesture of love, every attempt to brighten Lily's sparse life had been intercepted, liquidated, and erased by Serafina. It wasn't just physical objects. It was the erasure of love, of thoughtfulness. It was a calculated cruelty that went far beyond mere neglect. A new chilling thought pierced through the fog of Eleanor's disbelief. "Lily," she asked, her voice tight, barely a whisper, "do you remember all the nice clothes and books and special things I used to send for you? Your daddy used to tell me you loved them so much." Lily looked confused. "What clothes? What books, Granny? I mostly only had my school uniform and a few other things. The ones in my suitcase were almost new." It was then that the full weight of the deception crashed down on Eleanor. Not only had Serafina been selling Lily's things, but she had been lying to David and, by extension, to Eleanor all these years. Her son had been duped, and her granddaughter had been deprived, not just of material possessions, but of the very knowledge that she was loved and thought of by her grandmother. That night, long after Lily was asleep, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, a yellow legal pad spread before her. Her meticulous nature meant she kept records of everything. She went through her bank statements, cross-referencing dates and amounts. Over the past 2 years, she had consistently sent David extra money, separate from her occasional gifts, specifically earmarked for Lily's expenses. School trips, new winter coats, birthday parties, even a fund for future college. The total was staggering. Nearly $8,000. $8,000 meant to enrich Lily's life, gone. It was a systematic theft, a betrayal of trust that left Eleanor feeling sick to her stomach. The next morning, armed with irrefutable proof and a steely resolve, Eleanor called David again. She wasn't going to let him brush her off this time. Her voice, though calm, was infused with a cold, unwavering determination. "David," she began, cutting straight to the chase, "I need to ask you about the money I've been sending for Lily." His response was instantaneous, defensive, and exactly what she expected. "What money, Mom? I don't know what you're talking about." The practiced denial was infuriating. "The $8,000, David," Eleanor stated, her voice sharp with precision. "The money I've been sending you over the past 2 years, specifically designated for Lily's needs. For her clothes, her school supplies, her activities. It was always clearly marked." She paused, letting the figure hang in the air, a heavy indictment. A slight hesitation on David's end, a telltale sign of his scrambling for an explanation. "Mom, look, we've had some financial difficulties lately. Serafina's been managing the household expenses, and sometimes funds get moved around, to cover bills, unexpected costs. Things are tight." His voice was rushed, laced with an uncomfortable defensiveness. "Moved around?" Eleanor's voice rose, a raw edge entering it. "Moved around? David, that money was for Lily, for her warmth, her education, her happiness. She's been wearing clothes that are too small. She has no dice, no books, because her mother sells everything I send her. She even sold the teddy bear I sent for her birthday, David. Do you hear me? She sold her own daughter's birthday gift." There was a stunned silence on David's end. That can't be right, Mom," he finally stammered, his voice laced with genuine disbelief this time, a crack in his carefully constructed denial. "Serafina wouldn't. She just wouldn't." "Ask her, David," Eleanor challenged, her voice low and dangerous. "Ask her what happened to the teddy bear. Ask her why Lily has no toys. Ask her where that $8,000 went. And then you tell me that she just wouldn't." Eleanor hung up the phone, her hand trembling. The conversation had left her feeling utterly sick, a bitter taste in her mouth. Serafina's actions were not just an inconvenience or a momentary lapse in judgment. They were a systematic, calculated deprivation, not only of Lily's material comfort, but of her emotional well-being. She had effectively erased Eleanor's presence and love from Lily's life, transforming well-intended gifts into cold, hard cash for her own selfish purposes. The quiet war for Lily's soul had just escalated, and Eleanor knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that she would stop at nothing to expose the truth and protect her granddaughter. If you're finding this story as shocking as I did, please continue watching, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss a single part of what happens next. It's about to get even more unbelievable. 2 days after the chilling conversation with David, A tense quiet had settled over Eleanor's home. David hadn't called back, and Eleanor knew it was simply another confirmation of his unwillingness to face the truth. Lily was flourishing, a small testament to the power of unconditional love, but Eleanor's heart remained heavy, burdened by the deception and the fear for her granddaughter's future. She decided to organize Lily's small backpack, a habit born of her meticulous nature, hoping to find any stray forgotten items that might give Lily comfort. As she reached into a side pocket, her fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of paper, folded and refolded until it was almost soft. Curious, she pulled it out. It was a printout, clearly from a mobile phone, displaying a series of text messages. Eleanor's eyes scanned the names at the top, Serafina and David. Her breath caught in her throat. The date stamp indicated the conversation had taken place approximately 3 months ago, well before Serafina's abrupt departure. She began to read, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Serafina, your mother keeps calling, asking to visit Lily. She's getting suspicious, though. Maybe we should let her visit once to keep her quiet. Eleanor's vision blurred with sudden clarity. They hadn't wanted her to visit. They were actively avoiding her. She remembered the excuses, the cancellations, the vague promises of next time. David, yeah, agreed, just to keep her quiet. Don't want her guilt-tripping us about our parenting again. Guilt-tripping? Eleanor had only ever expressed love and concern. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. Serafina, if she does visit, Lily knows to be on her best behavior and not mention anything about our rules. I've already drilled it into her. A cold, creeping dread spread through Eleanor. This confirmed her darkest fears. They had coached Lily, manipulated her into concealing the truth, making her complicit in their deceit. The rules weren't just for control, they were a secret to be guarded. Then, a message that made Eleanor's blood run cold, confirming the depth of their cynicism and greed. Serafina, the money she sends is too useful to risk losing because she disapproves of our parenting. Eleanor gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound. It wasn't just about avoiding her guilt trips, it was about the money. Her money. Lily's money. They had been using her as a personal ATM, all while denying her access to her granddaughter and systematically depriving Lily. The realization was a devastating blow, a betrayal of monumental proportions. She scrolled down, her fingers trembling, to the final message in the thread. It was Serafina again, and these words made Eleanor's heart stop entirely, a chilling premonition settling over her. Serafina, sometimes I think it would be easier if your mother just disappeared. She asked too many questions. Eleanor stared at the words, her mind struggling to process the sheer malice. Disappeared? Was that a threat? A twisted fantasy? Her gaze flickered to David's response, hoping for some shred of decency, some sign of his horror. David, we could limit contact even more then, or we could move, get a new place, change our number. Tell her we need space to focus on our family. That would solve it. Eleanor sank into the nearest chair, the crumpled printout clutched in her trembling hand. The air seemed to leave her lungs. They weren't just manipulating her, they were actively plotting to erase her from Lily's life completely, to sever all ties, to make her disappear. The benign excuses of needing space were a cover for a calculated, cruel plan to cut her off entirely, all for the sake of their financial gain and their twisted desire to maintain control over Lily without interference. The woman who had given birth to David, who had loved and supported him unconditionally, was merely an inconvenience, a source of funds to be exploited and then discarded. That evening, as Lily sat sketching at the kitchen table, Eleanor approached her gently. She held up the crumpled printout. Lily, sweetheart, I found these papers in your backpack. Do you know where they came from? Lily's face immediately flushed a deep crimson, her eyes darting away. Her small hands tightened around her crayon. I found them in the trash at Mama's house, she confessed in a whisper, her voice trembling. And I kept them because they mentioned you. Because they said bad things about you, Granny. And I know you're not bad. Her little chin quivered. Eleanor's heart ached with tenderness for her brave granddaughter. She knelt beside Lily, taking her hand. What did they say that was bad, darling? Tears welled in Lily's eyes. Mama said if I ever told you about the rules, or the money, or anything, she said something bad would happen to you. She said grown-ups who cause trouble sometimes have to go away forever. Lily buried her face in Eleanor's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. The child had been living under a constant threat, not just of punishment for herself, but of harm coming to her beloved granny. The sheer psychological torture Serafina had inflicted was monstrous. Eleanor held Lily tightly, stroking her hair, her own eyes brimming with tears, but her resolve was now an unyielding rock. "Listen to me, Lilybug," she said, her voice firm and steady, radiating in strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Nothing bad is going to happen to me. Ever. And nothing bad is going to happen to you either. Do you hear me?" Lily nodded, sniffling, "But I think it's time your daddy knew the truth about everything. The real truth. And you don't have to be scared anymore." Later that night, long after Lily was tucked safely into bed, Eleanor worked methodically. She made multiple copies of everything, the damning text messages, her meticulous records of the $8,000 sent for Lily, the heart-wrenching Lily's Rules notebook, and a series of photos she had taken of Lily's meager belongings. Each document was a piece of evidence, a bullet in her arsenal. The game was over. The deceit was exposed. Eleanor was no longer just a concerned grandmother. She was a warrior preparing for war, a war she would fight with every fiber of her being for Lily, for truth, and for justice. 6 weeks. 6 weeks had passed since Serafina's sleek Porsche had vanished down Eleanor's gravel driveway, leaving Lily to walk alone. In those weeks, Lily had transformed from a guarded, frightened child into a bright, curious girl, her laughter filling the once quiet farmhouse. Eleanor had poured every ounce of her love and energy into rebuilding Lily's spirit, and the results were a beautiful testament to resilience. Then the phone rang. It was David, his voice tight with a forced authority that barely concealed an underlying tension. "Mom, Serafina's back from Greece. She's been incredibly worried about Lily. We need her home now. We'll be there to pick her up later today." There was no inquiry about Lily's well-being, no apology, just a demand. Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened. Her voice, however, remained calm, steady, infused with an unshakable resolve. "She is home, David. She's safe. She's happy. And she's learning what it feels like to be a child instead of a prisoner." David scoffed, clearly repeating a script. "Mom, you're exaggerating. Serafina spent a lot of time reflecting in Greece. She's gained so much perspective on motherhood. She realized she needed to be a better parent, and now she wants to make things right with Lily." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. "Oh, really?" Eleanor challenged, a hint of steel in her tone. Did her perspective also shed light on the $8,000 I sent for Lily's care that seemingly vanished? Or perhaps the systematic selling of Lily's toys and clothes? Maybe she can explain that to me when she comes to collect her daughter. Eleanor knew she was hitting a nerve. The silence on David's end was deafening. "Mom, this isn't fair," David finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. "We've been through a lot. You can't just keep Lily." "Fair?" Eleanor echoed, a sharp edge entering her voice. "What's fair about abandoning a 6-year-old child on the side of a road? What's fair about her having to ask permission to eat? No, David, I'm not sending my granddaughter back until I have some real answers. If you want to discuss this, you both can come here. But Lily stays with me." She ended the call, her heart thumping, knowing that confrontation was now inevitable. Barely 2 hours later, the familiar growl of Serafina's Porsche Cayenne announced their arrival, pulling in just behind David's sensible sedan. Serafina emerged first, looking as impeccably groomed and untouchable as the day she had left. Her designer dress was pristine, her makeup flawless, her sunglasses perched on her nose with an air of sophisticated indifference. David followed, looking distinctly less composed, his shoulders slumped, his gaze avoiding Eleanor's. Serafina didn't bother with greetings. She swept past Eleanor, a gust of expensive perfume preceding her, her voice sharp and demanding. "Where is she? Lily? Get out here, your mother is home." Eleanor blocked her path, planting her feet firmly. "Lily is resting, Serafina. Something she's been able to do a lot of since she's been here, without fear or pressure." Her tone was cool, controlled, a stark contrast to the fire brewing in her eyes. David stepped forward, wringing his hands. Mom, please. Serafina has been worried sick. She cut her retreat short to come back for Lily. His words were an attempt to create a veneer of concern, a fragile shield against the truth. Eleanor turned her gaze to Serafina, her voice cutting through David's platitudes. A retreat, Serafina? For personal development? Or was it to escape the responsibilities of motherhood under the guise of finding yourself? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You claim you went for independence, for growth. But she's 6 years old, Serafina. Children that age need stability and love, not a mother who abandons them in pursuit of her own self-serving independence. Serafina's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. Are you questioning my parenting, Eleanor? Her voice was laced with a chilling condescension, a familiar tactic. Yes, Eleanor replied, her voice unwavering. Yes, Serafina, I am. Profoundly. A flicker of something dark crossed Serafina's face, quickly suppressed. Well, that's neither here nor there. Lily is my daughter, and it's time for her to come home. She tried to push past Eleanor again, her patience clearly wearing thin. Eleanor stood firm. Home to what, Serafina? Her voice now vibrated with righteous anger, each word a hammer blow. Home to a place where she has to ask permission to eat? Home to where her toys are sold and her grandmother's money is stolen? Home to where she's coached to lie about how she's treated, fearing what bad things might happen if she tells the truth? Serafina's composure finally cracked. The mask slipped, her face contorted in a sneer, a flash of genuine venom. How dare you? Lily is a dramatic child, always making up stories for attention. Oh, really? Eleanor shot back, pulling out the crumpled printouts of the text messages from her pocket. She held them out to David, her hands steady despite the tremor of rage coursing through her. Then perhaps David would like to explain this. Or you, Serafina. Perhaps you'd like to explain your conversations about keeping me quiet, and how my money is too useful to lose, and how it would be easier if your mother just disappeared. David took the papers, his brow furrowed in confusion. As his eyes scanned the printed words, the color drained from his face, leaving him pale and ashen. He read, his lips moving silently, and then a profound horror settled in his eyes. Oh God, he whispered, crumpled the papers in his hand, looking at Eleanor with raw, naked disbelief. What have we done? Serafina, seeing David's reaction, quickly regained her composure, her voice sharp and dismissive. It's nothing, David, just me blowing off steam. Lily is dramatic and manipulative. Always has been. She probably put those ridiculous rules in her backpack herself for attention. Eleanor couldn't hold back any longer. The pent-up frustration, the anger, the pain for Lily all erupted. Dramatic and manipulative? She thundered, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. She asked me if she was allowed to eat. She's a child, Serafina, not a pawn in your selfish games. Children need love. They need to feel safe and valued and cherished, not starved and isolated and psychologically tortured. Her final words hung in the air, a devastating accusation that pierced the silence. Eleanor stood firm, her gaze locked on Serafina, who was still trying to dismiss Lily's suffering. This isn't about drama, Serafina, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper that commanded attention. This is emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, neglect. This is making a child believe she's unworthy of basic necessities like food and affection. This is systematic cruelty. David, who had been staring at the crumpled text messages, slowly raised his head. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror, as if seeing his wife, and perhaps himself, clearly for the first time. Is it true? He whispered, his voice hoarse, broken. Did you really sell the gifts my mother sent? Lily's teddy bear? Her books? Serafina, caught off guard by David's direct question, faltered for a brief moment. Her composure, which had been so meticulously maintained, flickered. Well, yes, she admitted, a defensive edge returning to her voice. We needed the money, and your mother sends such frivolous things anyway. Toys, books. Lily is too mature for such childishness. They just cluttered the apartment. She tried to regain her usual disdainful air, but it was brittle now, a transparent shield. David flinched as if physically struck. He turned his gaze back to Eleanor, then to the spot where Lily had been. She's 6 years old, Serafina, he murmured. almost to himself, the words barely audible. 6-year-olds are supposed to have toys and books. They're supposed to play. The realization was visibly hitting him, a slow, agonizing dawning of truth. Eleanor seized the moment. She moved to the kitchen table where she had meticulously laid out her evidence. With a sweep of her hand, she presented it, her bank statements detailing the 8,000 sent for Lily, photos she'd taken of Lily's nearly empty suitcase and meager belongings, and finally the small, worn notebook titled Lily's Rules. "They're not supposed to be afraid to eat, David," Eleanor said, her voice resonating with conviction. "They're not supposed to learn that love is conditional, that their basic needs are privileges to be earned. They're not supposed to be coached to lie to their own grandmother out of fear." She pushed the rule book across the table towards David. "Read this. This is the truth of your daughter's life." David's eyes fell upon the childish handwriting. He picked up the notebook, his fingers tracing the words on the first page. "Only talk when Mama asks." He flipped through, his face growing paler with each rule he read. Lily wrote this," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and shame. "Yes, David," Eleanor confirmed, her eyes still fixed on Serafina, whose face was now rigid with fury. "She wrote it because she was trying to survive. She wrote it because she was living in fear." Just then a small figure appeared in the doorway of the living room. Lily, drawn by the raised voices, stood there, her eyes wide, clutching her teddy bear. "Mama?" she called out, her voice a tiny thread of uncertainty. Serafina's demeanor shifted instantly, a practiced, almost miraculous softening. Her face, rigid with anger moments before, morphed into a saccharine smile. "Lilybug, oh, my precious girl. Come here. Come to Mama. I'm so glad to see you. It's time to come home now." She held out her arms, a picture of maternal concern. Lily looked between Serafina's outstretched arms and Eleanor's protective stance, her small face a mixture of longing and profound fear. Her gaze darted to David, then back to Serafina. "Do I have to?" she whispered, the question cutting through the tense air, sharp and clear. David visibly flinched, the sound of his daughter's desperate plea a physical blow. Serafina's smile vanished, her face turning rigid with barely suppressed rage. "Of course. You have to, Lily. Don't be silly. I'm your mother." Her voice was dangerously low, a stark contrast to her previous sugary tone. But Lily, bolstered by weeks of Eleanor's unconditional love, found a fragile courage. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice grew stronger. "No, I like it here. I don't want it to follow the rules anymore. I want to stay with Granny." Eleanor stepped forward, placing herself firmly between Lily and Serafina, a human shield. Her voice was calm but resolute. "No, she's not. She's not going anywhere with you, Serafina." Serafina erupted. "You can't do this, Eleanor. This is kidnapping. I'll call the police. I'll have you arrested." She shrieked, her voice shrill and furious. Eleanor didn't even flinch. She simply tilted her head, her gaze unwavering. "Be my guest, Serafina. You can call them right now. I have plenty of evidence to share with them about what's truly going on here." Her calm certainty seemed to deflate Serafina slightly, her bluster losing some of its force. David, however, was no longer looking at Serafina. He was looking at Lily, truly looking at her for the first time in what felt like months. He saw the healthy flush in her cheeks, the newfound light in her eyes, the way she clung to Eleanor, utterly terrified of her own mother. He then looked down at the rule book in his hand, his eyes falling on rule number 5. "Don't cry. Crying makes Mama upset and gives her a headache." He looked at Lily's tear-streaked face, and a wave of profound guilt washed over him. "Jesus Christ, Serafina," David whispered, his voice filled with self-loathing. "What did we do to her?" He turned to his wife, his gaze now blazing with a newfound anger. "Tell me about the money. Tell me about the gifts, all those things Mom sent for Lily, the ones you told me she loved away. Where did they go? Where did $8,000 go, Serafina?" Serafina, cornered and exposed, tried to deflect. "They went to household expenses, David. We have bills. We have a lifestyle to maintain." Just as the argument reached its fever pitch, a new voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the chaos from the open doorway. "I'm Agent Peterson from Child Protective Services. a woman in a crisp uniform announced, stepping into the living room. Her eyes swept over the scene, assessing the tension, the accusations, the tearful child. I received a call about a child welfare concern. All eyes turned to her. There was a stunned silence, broken only by David's quiet, broken voice. I did, he confessed, looking at Eleanor, then at Lily, then finally with a look of utter defeat at the agent. I did. Agent Peterson, her expression unreadable, led Lily into the kitchen, closing the door behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by Serafina's furious muttering and David's deep, shuddering breaths. Eleanor stood protectively near the closed door, her heart aching for Lily, yet filled with a fierce hope. 20 minutes later, the kitchen door opened. Agent Peterson emerged, her face now etched with a quiet sadness, her eyes meeting Eleanor's with a shared understanding. She turned to Serafina, her voice calm but firm. Mrs. Serafina, based on my conversation with Lily and the evidence presented here, she gestured vaguely to the table where the documents lay. Lily will remain in Eleanor's care. We will be initiating a full investigation into the allegations of neglect and emotional abuse. Serafina's composure shattered. A primal shriek tore from her throat. You can't do that. She's my daughter. You have no right. This is outrageous. Her face was contorted with fury, her flawless facade completely obliterated. Agent Peterson remained unperturbed, her stance unwavering. I have every right, Mrs. Serafina, when a child's welfare is at stake. My primary concern is Lily's safety and well-being. The reports I've received, now corroborated by Lily's own statements, suggest a clear pattern of emotional abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. Serafina whirled to David, her eyes pleading, desperate for his usual complicity, his unwavering support. David, tell them, this is a lie. Tell them your mother is making it up. David, however, was looking at Lily. The little girl had quietly slipped her hand into Eleanor's, her small fingers clutching Eleanor's tightly. Her face, which had been so afraid, was now calm, secure, nestled against her grandmother's side. He saw the color returning to her cheeks, the spark in her eyes that had been absent for so long. He looked at the crumpled rulebook, then back at his daughter, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time in years. I can't, David said softly, his voice heavy with resignation and shame. I can't tell them that anymore. Not when I see her, not when I read this. He gestured to the rulebook. A chilling silence descended upon the room. Serafina stared at David, her face shifting from shock to a cold, venomous fury. The realization that she had truly lost, that her carefully constructed world was crumbling, dawned on her. You'll regret this, David, she spat, her voice laced with pure hatred. Both of you, I won't let you destroy my family. David met her gaze, his own eyes now clear, devoid of his usual deferential submission. You destroyed it yourself, Serafina, he replied, his voice quiet but firm. The moment you decided our daughter was something to be controlled and exploited, instead of someone to be loved and nurtured. Lily, sensing the shift, the decisive turn in her fate, looked up at Eleanor, her eyes wide with hopeful trepidation. Am I staying with you, Granny? She whispered, her voice fragile. Eleanor squeezed Lily's hand, her heart overflowing. For now, sweetheart, she assured her, her voice thick with emotion. And for as long as you need to. You're safe here. Always. The subsequent 6 months were a blur of legal proceedings, court dates, and therapy sessions for Lily. The evidence Eleanor had meticulously gathered, combined with Lily's brave testimony, painted a damning picture. Ultimately, David was awarded full custody of Lily, with Serafina granted supervised visitation only. To no one's surprise, Serafina attended only 2 such visits, cold and distant, before disappearing entirely, reportedly to Florida, leaving no forwarding address. She never looked back. David, humbled and heartbroken by his failures, made a monumental decision. He sold his apartment in the city, recognizing the toxic environment it had represented. He moved back to their small, quiet hometown, purchasing a modest house just 2 miles from Eleanor's farm. He resigned from his demanding job, finding new work that allowed him to be present, to truly be a father. He spent countless hours in therapy, grappling with his own complicity, rebuilding his self-worth, and learning to navigate the complex emotional landscape of being a single father to a child who had endured so much. Lily's healing journey was remarkable. The terrified, withdrawn child slowly but surely blossomed. She laughed more, argued playfully about bedtime, and made friends at her new school. The most poignant change was her relationship with food. She no longer hoarded snacks or asked permission to eat. Instead, she'd ask for seconds, her appetite a sign of her growing security and trust. Her nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of playing in Granny's garden. One golden afternoon, Eleanor sat on her porch swing, watching Lily and David in the vegetable garden. David, stripped to his t-shirt, was patiently showing Lily how to plant basil seedlings. Lily, covered in dirt, was giggling, her bright eyes fixed on her father, a picture of peace and restored connection. It was everything Eleanor had fought for, a living testament to the power of love and perseverance. Suddenly, Lily let out a delighted squeal. "Granny! Daddy, look!" She was kneeling by a patch of cucumber leaves, carefully parting them. In her small hands, she held a tiny trembling kitten, no bigger than her palm, its fur soft and mottled. "I think her mama left her," Lily said, her voice full of tenderness and understanding. She cradled the kitten gently against her cheek. After a moment, she looked up at Eleanor and David, her eyes shining with profound insight. "I'm going to name her Hope," she announced. "Because sometimes when you think nobody wants you, somebody does. And then you get to have a new, happy life." Eleanor smiled, tears pricking her eyes. The profound wisdom from her small granddaughter, who had found her own hope, was the greatest reward of all.